All right, let's get back to Brock Purdy because Brock Purdy played an incredible 3 quarters last week. Then the Niners used him in the two quarterback sneaks. On the very next play, he threw his worst pass. People say, I don't know. To me, I think the one to Ray at the end was even worse than the one to Juwan. After listening to Greg Cosell on the radio this week describe what he felt he saw on the ball to Jennings, he said that the corner forced outside leverage and that the ball was where it should have been, that Jennings just didn't get a chance to work his way back because he was kicked outside, and that also that Brock didn't get to follow through because of the rush, and if he had followed through, the ball wouldn't have been so in the middle, would have been closer to JJ, and he would have made a play on it. That was Cosell's thought from having watched the film and talking to the NFL Films people. It's funny, though, because when Shanahan was asked about it, he kind of went the other way and said that, that Jennings kind of absolved Jennings of any blame at all, right, and said that the ball should have been closer to Jennings. And you would think that Shanahan, as the deviser of the play and knowing the offense, would you'd almost defer to him, right, on that in that situation. But the way Cosell described it with such conviction that maybe it was a combination of factors, and Shanahan to some degree is standing up for his receiver. Also, maybe Shanahan sees the game more like in a receiver's goggles because he was a receiver. So you always got to factor that in as well. But Purdy made 2 really bad throws. The second one ended the game, and he finishes 21 of 30, 272. Those numbers aren't bad, but 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. The O-line did a nice job. Daniil Hunter got the only sack. It wasn't like Purdy got hit all day. He didn't get hit all day. What's your guys' feeling now that we know that Purdy was concussed on the quarterback sneaks? Does that then, of course, the question, and the one thing I didn't get a chance to, I thought we were going to get a chance to talk to Brock today, and I was planning on asking him, hey, how only Brock knows, right? I mean, he said that the reports are that he didn't start feeling concussion symptoms until he was on the plane, but who knows? I mean, that could have just been like, hey, that's when he revealed. But something tells me if he actually got concussed on the quarterback sneak, that he probably was a little foggy in the plays thereafter. It's not like a delayed effect thing. Anybody who's had their bell rung knows that, you feel the effects immediately. I can remember having a concussion in high school football when my head snapped back and hit the ground and my ears were ringing and my whole equilibrium was shot, and I wasn't playing quarterback at the time. And I wasn't worth a damn on the next 2 plays. So I just don't know exactly, what level of concussion or how much his eggs were scrambled at that point. But does it change anything about how you guys view those interceptions, knowing that he's in concussion protocol because of, and that's the other thing. We don't really even know what he's in concussion protocol on. I asked Shanahan, I said, was it the quarterback sneaks? And he said he couldn't say definitively, but he thinks so. It looked the one of those.
I mean, he got rocked on the first tush push.
One. I think that was
the first tush push. He got rocked.
Right, and his head did jerk back. So I don't know. Well, does it change anything? I'm not absolving. I'll say this: Brock Purdy's not going to make excuses. The Niners are not going to make excuses. Shanahan's not going to make excuses. Everybody's wearing it. But does it change your perception of those picks now that you know he's in concussion protocol?
I don't think it's necessarily making excuses. I think it's just bringing up exactly what happened. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to speculate. The 49ers don't seem to know that he had a concussion. He didn't say, I mean, going out in the media, usually like if you have a concussion, like bright lights are going to kind of mess with you a little bit. They're not going to put their quarterback in front of the media after the game if they have a concussion and they know it. So I think it was pretty clear that nobody had any idea, at least at that moment, and even right after the game. Maybe it impacted things, but also maybe it didn't. So I'm not going to speculate on whether it did or it didn't. I'm just going to evaluate what I saw, and what I saw during those plays was not good. But I'm not going to speculate on whether it did or it didn't. It could have, but it may not have. So not sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure. As Jesse said, it's hard to know. It's hard to speculate. I do think it could have had an effect. I don't necessarily look at his entire performance, whether I knew he was concussed or whether I didn't know he was concussed, as a bad one at all. I thought he played well for the majority of that game. The first pick, I thought it got away from him a little bit. At the time, I thought Jennings added an extra stem to the route. When you go back and watch it, it does feel that way with Purdy's, right, with Purdy's placement. But Shanahan said that he ran the route correctly. So that means he ran the route correctly, and Purdy just threw that ball too far inside. It happens. And then the second pick, it was just a bad decision in the moment, but he's a young quarterback going through that experience for the first time. Regardless of how many games he's played in college, he's going to have a moment where he takes an opportunity, and in that case, it didn't work out for him. That's a learning moment for him. But I thought he really played well for the majority of that game. So I don't know that how much, whether he was concussed in that moment, whether it affects him. It's hard for me to know any of those kinds of things. I think the bigger question mark and the fear is obviously how long he is out. And that's a different question because, again, I do feel like I think Sam Darnold can be fine in a lot of ways with this 49ers supporting cast and all of that, but that doesn't mean they don't need Brock Purdy. And so, yeah.
You know, there's this other thing that is a very much a factor. You know, Christian McCaffrey in a hard hit that he took earlier didn't want to come out of the game. Why? Because he didn't want the referees to think that he was concussed. Mm-hmm. And when these guys are so competitive, when the game's going on, it almost feels like they're not really in full disclosure mode on these head injuries because of the way the rules are, and they don't want to be taken out of the game. And that was an example where McCaffrey basically said, you know, hey, I wanted to play that next play because I don't want the officials to think I was concussed, because then I couldn't come back in the game. And who knows? I mean, there's the concussion protocols in game. It seems really kind of.
They have that independent person there, though, now for monitoring exactly this after the Tua situation. If you remember, Tua had the banging his head versus Green Bay. Then he threw the 3 picks. Very similar to Brock Purdy, where he hits his head. Nobody knows he's concussed. He throws 2 picks. Everybody's like, what happened? Blah, 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 blah. And then we find out he's concussed. After that, they added that individual person in the stadium that's independent of both teams, that's solely looking for players that bang their head or showing any concussion-like symptoms to remove them from the game. If you remember, Alexander Mattison took a pretty big hit from Dre Greenlaw early in that game, and he got himself straight back up, and it was like, yo, I think he got his lights shut out a little bit, and he got up and didn't show the symptoms. I think it's not because the referees. I think it's because of that independent arbitrator who can pull them from the game at any point and say they have concussion-like symptoms. And then if they get into the protocol, you don't know what's going to happen because they might not be allowed back in the game.
Mm-hmm. But they examined the guys in the tent, and did Brock ever go to the tent?
No,
I would say no. I don't think he did.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those things. It's like, okay, so yeah, we have people in place to examine you, but they examined you in that blue tent, and he never actually went to the blue tent. So did he? And it's like sometimes you kind of wonder if guys are deking these guys out of even the possibility of going to the blue tent because they know how it works. Here's the other thing in football. It happens all the time. You'll see it all the time. Every Sunday on almost every game, somebody gets hit hard and they raise their hand and they come out. Well, they don't all go to the blue tent, but that's almost kind of like, hey man, I need a blow. And a blow could just be, I'm out of wind. A blow could be like, I landed on the ball and I've lost my wind. A blow could be, I'm a little fuzzy. Guys raise their hand to come out for a play or two. And you wonder in that situation, not all those guys who raise their hand go into the tent and are examined for concussions. I don't know. We're really in a kind of a, I feel like we're in an age where we're in the in-between stage between the way concussions used to be dealt with, which is like only if you totally complained, to now it's like a little bit more out of your hands and the league has more control and they're trying to do best by the players, but the players also seem like they're kind of trying to avoid it, and then I remember in high school football, a lot of times guys would be like, you'd see the trainers come out, you'd be like, get the trainers away, because guys wanted to stay in the game, and you even see it now. I mean, there's guys that like, who was it? Warner that got knocked out of the last game, and he went to the sideline and like literally he's like getting his helmet back on. He wanted to go in on the next play. So it's kind of the way they're wired too. So it's like sometimes you kind of wonder if the rules have to be created to protect these players from themselves.
You had Jamal Adams, who hadn't played in a year, gets back and like 3 plays in or whatever, shows concussion symptoms, and he's like pissed off. He's like pushing referees off. He's like, he's no, pissed. Like, well, I'm not going in there. Like, let me play. I haven't played in a year. So yeah, I mean, there definitely is that element where players are certainly trying to avoid getting into any sort of protocol or going in the tent or any of that stuff. So you got to protect them from themselves. And, concussions are one of those things that it's like, who knows, players don't show it necessarily right away. Like to the naked eye, you can't necessarily tell. And then it's like, okay, well, XYZ happened. And you're like, well, in hindsight, maybe it was obvious, but I didn't think it was obvious in the moment. And who knows?
Well, and then I heard an interview the other day on 95.7 The Game with Bernie Kosar. And Kosar said over the course of his football career, he had like 88 concussions or some ridiculous number. And I almost felt like saying 88 times you got taken out of the game. No, no, you did not.
It never happened.
So in other words, it's almost like a number that you get like the real number later in your career, or maybe when you're done playing, you admit to a number that's far higher than you admit to on game day if you added them all up. I don't know. It's a very murky situation.